What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. Today, my special guest is Mr. Jasper Rivers, myself. So, hello, Jasper. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Just kidding. So, I'm doing a solo podcast because I've got quite a few updates I want to share with everybody. And also, I sent out an email last week asking you what your number one challenge is on the topic of revenue management. And I've got a lot of responses, really good questions, and so I want to cover a number of these questions on the podcast today. Now, if you've been listening for a while, then you know that recently revenue management has really been my focus. I've been working with a number of private clients, and I'm also responsible for the revenue management department for FreeWild. And let me give a quick update on FreeWild because we are about to open up for guests in our 4 cabins in Idlewild, California, which we're super excited about. It's turned out absolutely amazing. You can check us out on Instagram at StayFreeWild. We're putting out some really cool content right now, and you'll see that the design and the way the units turned out is incredible. I've been staying there. Over the last few weeks, I've been staying there quite a bit, and it's so cool to notice like the little design elements that our interior designers have done a great job at putting together. But yeah, we're about to launch, and we're actually been getting a number of bookings already through Instagram, which is pretty cool. We haven't opened up our direct booking website and our Airbnb listings yet, as we're not quite ready to receive guests, but in the next few weeks we'll be hosting our first guest, so that's pretty exciting. But yeah, so I'm my role in FreeWild, which we're really looking to expand in the next few years to 20 to 25 different locations. And so my job is going to be revenue management, right? That's what I'm going to be responsible for, which is why over the last year or so, I've been really diving into that topic, and I've, been educating myself. Obviously, already have quite a bit of experience with pricing and revenue management over the last 10 years or so. But I've really dove in and tried to find any type of resource on this topic. I've invited a lot of people on the podcast as well, working with private clients. And yeah, it's really something that I'm really excited about. I'm really passionate. To me, the numbers and the graphs and looking at the data and optimizing the prices is a lot of fun. I have a background in mathematics and statistics and optimizing stuff. So for me, it's really like channeling my nerdy side, which I really enjoy. So super excited to dive more into that topic. And tomorrow we actually are doing a free training on revenue management. Eric and I put together a webinar that you can join for free. You can just sign up at getpaidforyourpad.com/training. So getpaidforyourpad.com/training. Just put in your email, and then we'll send you all the details. But yeah, this training will be tomorrow, so that's Wednesday at 1 p.m. PST. It's 4 p.m. EST. So we're going to be live on Zoom for like an hour and a half. We're going to teach you the stuff that we have learned over the last few years, where we think you can really get the most improvement in your own pricing and revenue management strategy for your listing. So go ahead, sign up for the training, getpaidforyourpad.com/training, and looking forward to see you guys tomorrow on the Zoom call. Now I'm going to dive into the questions that I've received. And by the way, I appreciate all of you sending in your questions. If you're not on our email list, you can sign up at getpaidforyourpad.com. You can download a free ebook that we put together as well. And once you put in your email there, you'll be receiving our emails. We email a couple times a week, sometimes a bit more often than other times. But we try to really provide like valuable content for everybody. So yeah, if you are on our email list, then you may have seen my email where I asked for the biggest challenges, the biggest questions that you guys have on the topic of revenue management. And I got a lot of responses, which is awesome. I won't be able to cover everything, but I wanted to go through some of the questions that I thought were most interesting, and give you guys some some feedback on those questions. So. All right, well, let's dive in. So question number 1 is from Nicole, and she's asking, how can we increase our pricing when some guests leave a 4-star rating for value and or locations, but give all positive statements in their reviews? Met expectations, exactly like the photos, super clean, peaceful setting, close to national park. Now, this is a challenge that is coming up more often, I've noticed, than in the past. It seems that Airbnb guests are a little bit more critical for some reason. Like the ratings that they give us I think it has gone down a little bit. I think it might have to do with the way that Airbnb is asking for feedback. If you've never been a guest on Airbnb, by the way, I highly recommend book a unit in your neighborhood or wherever you're renting out, so you can go through that whole experience. Because in order to understand our guest, we have to be a guest ourselves, right? So if you haven't done that, I would highly encourage you, just book one night somewhere, go for the experience, take some notes, and pay close attention to everything that the whole process of booking, selecting the listing, the messaging from the guest, of the host, the entire experience. Take note of that, because that can be very inspiring, but also you'll learn a lot from the process on Airbnb, because Airbnb is constantly changing things, right? And if you're not on a regular basis staying at an Airbnb yourself, then you might not be aware that the experience that our guests are going through on Airbnb actually can change quite a bit. So recently I noticed that Airbnb is asking a lot more questions when it comes to the reviews. So there's a lot more ways to leave feedback through that review process. And I feel like that may have, I don't know, I feel like I'm just seeing more hosts who are reporting that it's harder for them to get consistent 5-star reviews. And so I guess this is not really a pricing options, but it's related to pricing, right? And one thing that I've learned over the last few years is that revenue management is very closely related to marketing and guest experience, right? Because if we improve the guest experience, then we can also raise our ADR. So Nicole is asking a very good question. Like if we're not getting consistent 5-star reviews, then, how can we increase our pricing? Now, there's a lot to this. So I'm going to do my best to explain everything, all my thoughts on this. Number one is, when it comes to the review scores are not necessarily related to your pricing, right? So like if you charge a higher price, it doesn't necessarily mean that the guests are going to then leave you with a lower rating. Surely the guest expectations will go up somewhat when you raise your prices, but it's definitely not a one-on-one relationship. Like I've rented out all sorts of units from like super budget to luxurious, and sometimes the guests that have a bigger budget and book luxury units, sometimes they're actually way less critical than the people that rent budget units. So it's not always the case that when you increase your pricing that your ratings are going to go down. Now, the value rating might go down a little bit, but the value rating is the only rating where I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be a 5.0. The reason behind that is, if all your guests are leaving a 5.0 value rating, to me, that means that you're probably underpricing yourself, right? And so the other ratings are different, because the other ratings have to do with the service that you provide, right? The communication, the cleanliness, accuracy. That's all stuff that you can control to a certain extent, right? So as you raise your prices, you can just raise your own standards, and you should be able to retain the 5-star ratings across the board. But the value rating is the only one where it might drop a little bit, but I kind of see that as a good sign. It kind of means that you're charging a really good price for your listing, right? So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the ratings necessarily as you increase prices. But what I will say is the ratings, the reviews there's a lot that you can do to get better reviews. And this is something that I literally last week went through with one of our private clients. So it's very top of mind for me right now. So I'm just going to go into the advice that I gave our client. There are 6 points that I mapped out in order to improve your review ratings. Okay, so there's 6 points. So I'm going to go through this because I think this is going to be very important for a lot of people listening right now. So number 1 is we have to ask our guests the night after they spend one night in our unit, we have to send out a message to ask for feedback and to seed with the guests that we're looking to provide a 5-star experience, right? So the message that we send out is the following. So on the morning after their check-in, right, we send them a message saying, hey, just wanted to check in with you to make sure you've arrived well. We want you to have a 5-star experience. So if it's anything less than that, then please let us know so we can make it right. Okay. Now that message does a couple things. Number 1, it seeds the idea in the guest that we are looking to provide a 5-star experience, and we're specifically asking the guest to reach out to us if it's anything less than that. Now that means that if there's any type of issue and the guest doesn't reach out, they're probably not going to penalize us for it, because they're going to think like, okay, well, yeah, there was a small issue, but they were specifically asking me to reach out. I didn't reach out, so I'm not going to leave a bad review because of it, right? Now, if they do reach out, then we can fix it. And a lot of people don't like to complain. So a lot of guests will kind of oversee little issues, but then when it comes to time for the review, then they might actually, give us a lower rating because of that issue that they didn't reach out to us for, right? So we have to make our guests feel comfortable, and we have to encourage our guests to reach out to us if there's anything that can cause their experience to be less than 5 stars, right? So this is a very important part. Number 2 is in some markets, and this is market dependent, but in some markets, we have to educate our guests on how the review system works. Because there are a lot of people who don't realize that a 4-star is a bad review. They don't realize that a 3-star is a bad review. Okay, example, one of our clients just got a 3-star review from somebody who ended up canceling their stay because they got sick. So it had nothing to do with the host, and that person literally messaged our client and said, hey, I'm giving you a 3-star, an average review because I got sick, so I didn't really experience the stay, right? So I'm just giving you an average score. I'm giving you a 3-star, which is an average score in their mind. But as you know, a 3-star review is really a terrible rating for us as a host, right? But that guest didn't know that. The guest isn't aware of that. So we have to educate our guests. Now, this is the reason why I say this is market dependent, because what I've noticed is in some markets, for some reason, Airbnb, the guests are more educated. I don't know why exactly, but I'm just noticing that from working with lots of hosts around the world. Some markets, people have no idea how the rating system works, and we have to explain it to them. So we have to either use one of those fridge magnets. If you go on Amazon and you look for Airbnb review system explained or something like that, there's a lot of people that have created fridge magnets that basically explain that a 4-star review is not a good review, and it really helps to educate your guests on this by using these magnets. So check them out on Amazon. I'm sure you can find it. But there's other ways to educate your guests too, right? I mean, you could send them a message too. That's some hosts do that. I like the fridge magnet option because it's a more subtle way of educating. But you could also message your guests and just explain to them like, hey, for example, before they leave a review, you could send them a message and say like, hey, we loved hosting you. Thank you for being such a great guest. We're going to leave you with a 5-star review. We would appreciate if you could leave us a review as well. I don't like asking for the 5-star review, but I'll ask for the review. And then, you could say something like, hey, please note that the Airbnb review system works a little different than the hotel review system. Like a 5-star review basically means that you enjoyed your stay, and anything less means that there were some severe issues with your stay, right? So please keep that in mind. That's another way of educating the guest. I like the subtle way, but this is also a way that could work. Now, number 3 is you got to build a relationship with your guests. And the reason is that, imagine that you're staying at an Airbnb and you're hosted by a friend, right? Now, you probably never going to leave a 4-star or less than 4-star review for your friend, right? Because this person is your friend, and you're not going to do that. So, it works the same way with our guests. Like if we communicate with them and we build a little bit of a relationship, and the way to do that is share something about yourself and show some interest in your guest, have a bit more of a conversation with them by, outside of just sending them like the check-in message and the information, all that stuff. Also, if there's ever an issue with your guest, call them. Don't just message them or text them, like give them a call. It shows you care, and on a phone call, it's much easier to build the relationship than through messaging. As long as they haven't heard your voice, it doesn't really feel, you don't really feel like a real person. It's like, just the messages and the pictures and everything. So, calling your guests can really make a big difference, especially when there's an issue. I've noticed this over and over again. Anytime we encounter an issue with our guest and we call them, and we're very understanding, and we're very reasonable, and we're talking to the guest and we're helping the guest resolve the issue. We're apologizing that they're experiencing that. Typically, we'll still get a 5-star review, right? Just because the guest is like, well, clearly they care about my experience. They've handled the situation really well. They managed it well. And so, they'll still leave you with 5-star reviews. So keep that in mind, build a relationship with the guest, show that you care. And then also guest follow-up, right? This is not so much to get more 5 stars, but just to get more reviews, which, by the way, the number of reviews is very important in the Airbnb search results, okay? So if you have less than 25 reviews, you definitely want to push your guests to leave you a review, right? Without being too pushy, of course, but you want to remind them that you'd appreciate it if they leave you a review. So definitely, if a guest doesn't leave you a review within the first couple of days after the review period has started, definitely send them a quick message. Send them a reminder of like, hey, it was great to host you. As I mentioned, I gave you a 5-star review. I'd love for you to review me as well. This really helps our business. It's really important to us, so we appreciate your help with that. Right, so just remind them, because a lot of times, especially people that are new to Airbnb, they just forget. They get one notification from Airbnb or maybe another one, then maybe not logging into their Airbnb account. So just letting them know and following up maybe once or twice can significantly increase the number of reviews that you get, and that's going to help you with the search results. So that's going to help you get more bookings and so on. Now, my fifth point on getting better reviews is you have to make sure that you have a feedback loop in place in your business where either you or one of your team members, maybe your virtual assistant, is looking at all the reviews and all the private feedback and make sure that you implement all feedback that you're getting from guests. Even if it's something super, super small, we got to constantly improve the experience. We got to constantly focus on understanding the needs that our guests have and constantly focus on improving that guest experience, right? Because the better the guest experience, the better the review ratings are going to be, right? That's very, very, very simple. So make sure that's a focus in your business, to constantly monitor that, have a system in place where somebody's consistently looking at the feedback and implementing that feedback on a weekly or monthly basis. Now, Oh, that was I think that was 0.6 as well. Yeah, yeah. So I guess it's 5 points. But yeah, those, this whole process of maximizing the amount of reviews that you get, but also like, making sure that your guests understand how this review system works, and showing that you care, communicating correctly is really gonna drive a higher review score, and that's very important. So let's go back to your original question that Nicole asked, is how can we increase our pricing when we're not getting consistent 5-star reviews? I would suggest focus on your review process, right? Focus on everything that I've just gone through. And also, like I mentioned, it's not like not getting consistent 5-star reviews is not necessarily like a pricing problem, right? You might still be able to charge a higher price if you're, consistently fully occupied. You might be able to increase your prices even with implement that review process at the same time and still get a higher review score, right? So, all right, hope that's helpful. I'm going to take a sip of water because doing a solo podcast is a little bit more demanding on the voice. Okay, next question. All right, this is a question I got a lot from people. Sharon is one of them who asked this question. Sharon's been on the podcast actually a number of years ago. And she's asking, or it's not really a question, it's more of a statement, but she's saying pricing tools are daunting, hard to implement and learn it all. I'm old school. And I totally get that. I will completely 100% admit that even though I do have a background in mathematics and statistics, and I'm very comfortable with numbers and graphs, I also find it a little bit overwhelming sometimes looking at the data, because there's just so many graphs, there's so many, things that you can select, so many different numbers, and it's very intimidating, looking at your pricing tool and looking at all the data and trying to understand, like, how do we adjust prices based on all this information? It is daunting. But here's the good thing. When you start using a pricing app, you don't have to fully use all its functionality right away. Take it step by step, right? Even if you're currently manually just entering prices, and let's say, and I know there's a lot of people that are still doing this, just have one price for the weekdays and one price for the weekends, right? Now, I can guarantee you that you'll be able to increase your revenue by using a pricing tool. But I also understand that it's a bit daunting. It's a bit scary. It feels like you're giving away control to the tool, right? So what you can do is you can really slowly ease into it, right? So for example, you can easily turn on your pricing tool and just tell the tool to set the exact same prices that you set manually now, right? Because one common misconception that I feel like a lot of hosts have is that it's like they feel like they have to choose between setting prices manually or letting the algorithm do it. Well, the pricing tool is just a tool. You can still control 100% what prices it's going to set. But even if you just tell the pricing tool, just set weekdays at X and weekends at Y, it still gives you, there's still a reason to use the tool because it gives you a lot of information. You can see what your competitors are getting booked at. You can see like how much demand has hit the market compared to last year. You can see like what dates people are booking. You have so much really using the functionality. I will say it's still worth the $20 or whatever, $20 a month for something that you're paying for your listing. It's still way more value that the tool gives you than what you're paying for it. So I would highly suggest everybody use a pricing tool, right? Even if you're in that scenario, in that situation where you feel like, well, I'm not really a numbers person. I don't really. It's daunting. It's scary. Just start and keep it simple, right? And then slowly over time, you start looking at the data. You might feel a little bit more comfortable. Another thing you can do, if you feel uncomfortable with just giving full control to the algorithm, you can set a min and a maximum price. right? So for example, let's say you charge $250 on weekdays and you charge, $350 on weekends. You can actually tell the tool, you can give the tool a minimum, right? Let's say a minimum of like 225 and a maximum of 375, right? And now you tell the pricing tool, okay, within that range, you can kind of do what you want. That way, you know that you're never going to be charging less than the 225, and it's never going to be more than the 375. You could even do 250 to 350. You can make the band as narrow as you want. You can also say, hey, on weekends, I want to be in this range. Weekdays, I want to be in this range. There's so much flexibility that you have so that you can really just dive into it, ease into it without losing that control. But then you can start learning. You can start looking at the data every day, right? You can start looking at the prices that the tool wants you to set, right? And you can see why, right? You can see like, oh, there's more demand, 3 weeks from now. You might not be aware of that, right? You might not be aware that there's a conference or something and there's a lot of demand and you can charge a little more, right? So that's a learning process. And once you start working with the tool, you can then slowly, every week, you learn about one new feature and you're getting experience from looking at your numbers and everything. And then over time, it's going to be, you're going to start understanding a lot of stuff. Anything new is always a bit intimidating. It doesn't really matter whatever it is. If you start with something new, it always feels a little uncomfortable. You don't really know what you're doing. But the best way to learn is just getting experience with it, right? And then show up for our training tomorrow so you can learn. And listen to this podcast, of course, but you're already doing that. So that's my advice to everybody out there who feels intimidated by the pricing tools, or maybe you've already signed up for it, but you're scared to turn it on. I know there's people out there that are in that situation because I see it in our student groups. So yeah, just ease into it. Just use the default settings. If in a lot of, let's say you don't want to charge more, like I hear a lot from hosts as well. They're saying like, oh, the tool wants to charge a lot more. I'm not feeling comfortable with that. Well, just lower your base price, right? Again, you have full control over what the pricing app is going to do. All right, I'm going to take another sip of water and then we go to the next question. Next question is from Tommy, and let me take a sip of water. And Tommy, I'm going to read his question from the email that he sent me, actually. Okay, so Tommy is saying, one thing I'd like to figure out more is around occupancy pacing, considering real-time data instead of historical. He says, I manipulate my pricing based on pacing towards occupancy goals, which is great. That's great that you're doing that. Relative to historical booking windows in the area. Okay, so Tommy looks at historical booking windows. What does that mean? He looks at, when did people book in the past, right? For a certain date. When did people book last year or 2 years ago? And uses that to kind of predict when people are going to book now. And based on that, Tommy then knows how much occupancy he should have a certain amount of time out, right? So like 30 days out, 60 days out, 90 days out, which is great. And I'm continuing to reading the email here. This is great, but it doesn't take into account current booking window trends, which is very true. For example, if a big yearly event in the area gets canceled, severely skewing those booking windows, then my numbers don't take that into account. I'd like to figure out a way to be able to pull in actual present day booking windows instead of relying on historical. And that makes a lot of sense. Now, this is another reason why it's so useful to use a pricing app, because in your pricing app, you're going to be able to get a lot of this data. Okay, I will say to look into the future, and let me just illustrate Tommy's point here, right? And I sent out an email about this, but for example, this year, you guys know Taylor Swift. She got very popular. Every time she throws a concert, the Airbnb demand goes through the roof, right? Now, imagine that Taylor Swift books a concert in your city. Looking at past data, you're going to be charging the same price, as you've charged in the last few years. Now, obviously, like as bookings are starting to come in, the pricing app is going to see that there's more demand, and they're gonna slightly raise your prices. But it's good to be aware of what's going on. And one thing that you can do in order to kind of predict demand changes compared to the last few years is look at pickup, right? So what pickup means is essentially, I'm using Price Labs right now. Price Labs shows like the last 7-day pickup. That means I can see which dates are getting booked in the last 7 days. And I can look at a graph, right, for the next 6 months and see what percentage of the market occupancy has been booked in the last 7 days. And sometimes you see a bit of a spike there. And when you see that, then you know that there's something going on. It's like, why are suddenly a lot of people booking, for like this date that's like 2 months out? And then you look into it and you realize, they just announced an event there, right? So then you can be ahead of the curve, and you can adjust your prices because you know that probably it's going to book out, or at least the occupancy is going to be a lot higher than previous years, right? So look at pickup. I'm sure in other pricing apps like Wheelhouse, Beyond Pricing, I'm sure they have that functionality too, where you can look at the pickup in the last X amount of days, right? So that's one way to look at it. Number 2 is you want to look at the booking curve right now versus what it was last year. Because then you know if we're pacing ahead or pacing behind compared to previous year, right? So for example, let's say I'm looking at Thanksgiving weekend in our market right now. And I see that, today is October 3rd. Today, 30% of the market has been booked for Thanksgiving, right? 30%. And last year, at this exact day, 50% was booked. So what does that mean? That means that we're pacing behind for Thanksgiving. That means that last year, at this exact day, a lot more people had already booked their Thanksgiving stay in our market, or the supply has increased, right? Because right now we're only 30% occupied for Thanksgiving, and last year we were 50%. So it's either the supply went up or demand came down, right? Now, obviously, you can look at other data to see how many listings there are, and you can figure out if it's a supply or demand thing. But either way, by comparing the booking curves, you can figure out if we're pacing ahead or if we're pacing behind in terms of occupancy. And if you see that there's a big difference, then that can be a clue as to how to adjust pricing. So if we know that we're pacing way behind for a certain date range, then you want to go in and adjust your pricing to be more competitive, or you want to adjust your occupancy target. Let's say that, last year you wanted to be at 30% occupied for the next 90 days. But then if you see that we're pacing behind, now you might say, hey, I want to get a few more bookings in early because I don't want to be caught having to drop my prices by a lot last minute because I'm not getting booked, right? So hopefully that makes sense. It's a little tricky to kind of explain this over audio without. Normally on coaching calls, I'll share my screen and really point it out in the graphs and everything, which is a bit easier. But hopefully this makes sense. So Tommy, thanks for the question. Great question. All right, let me see how long I've already been talking for 35 minutes. Oh shit. Oops, I got a call in 5 minutes, so I gotta wrap it up here. But I'll probably do a few more of these episodes. Let me know if this is useful. But I got a lot more questions from you guys. So again, I appreciate you guys sending in your questions because it really helps me to to provide more value to the community. So before I wrap this up, again, we're doing a training tomorrow, Eric and I on Zoom. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to teach you the 7 Airbnb revenue management secrets. Okay. It's going to be a lot of fun. So sign up at getpaidforyourpad.com/training. Training is going to start 1 p.m. PST, 4 p.m. EST tomorrow. Even if you can't be there the whole time live, I still recommend you sign up because then we will automatically send you the recording as well. So go ahead, sign up, getpaidforyourpad.com/training. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.